Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters of Los Angeles County Fall League Day. And I'm Nancy Marr, and I'm a co-president of the County League Board with Margot Rieg. And we are both attending today to enjoy this program with you. The County League is an ILO, which means interleague organization, and it is comprised of 11 local leagues in Los Angeles County. The County League addresses issues that are specific to the county as a whole and are of interest and importance to all of our local leagues. We deal with items that relate to the County Board of Supervisors, to county departments, offices, and commissions. All of our work adheres to nonpartisan and DEI policies. The County League Voter is our e-newsletter published each month, and our website has recently been updated, so please do check it out at lwvlacounty.org. Today we're using the Zoom webinar format. Your microphones and as audience members, your microphones and videos are turned off. You are able to ask questions by using the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your screen. And you can post questions and comments, which will then be read to our speakers, and they will be able to respond. I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator today, Dr. Carolyn Eggleston. Carolyn is a professor emeritus, California State University, San Bernardino. She's a member of the County League Board and handles criminal justice issues. She's a member of the State Criminal Justice Committee and is active in the Long Beach Area League. And she is also active in AUW. So Carolyn, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Good morning. We're so excited that you're here. We have an excellent program that we hope you will enjoy. We have some really dynamic speakers and importantly, dealing with the issues of youth in our county. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of change occurring. Dealing with youth who have problems has always been an issue in LA County, and we continue to try to find ways to solve some of those problems. You know, we keep looking for a panacea that's going to solve everything, and of course it won't. But we are trying to take steps to better serve our youth in need in the county. And toward that end, we have several very well-known speakers that we hope will be able to enlighten you and give us all information and food for thought. We're hoping that this will be something that we will continue as a conversation because it's so important. Just a reminder, if you have questions, put your questions in the Q&A and I'll be monitoring those. And as soon as the speaker finishes, we'll ask those questions, but write them down whenever they occur. I have the honor to first introduce Paul Vinitz, who is a bureau chief at the County of Los Angeles Probation Department. He serves as the executive oversight of the department's placement and child welfare bureau. So he's well positioned to give us some information. He's been in the probation department for almost 38 years with lots of different kinds of experiences in both juvenile and adult operations, and has worked with major issues like child welfare, sex trafficking, substance abuse, education, and mental health. He's past president of the Probation, Parole, and Correctional Association and has served on its legislative committee for 18 years. Oh, and here's one of my favorite things. He has voted in every national, state, and local election since he became eligible at the age of 18. So welcome, Paul. Thank you so much for coming.
Carolyn and everybody, I'm really thrilled to be here today. I'm here on behalf of Interim Chief Probation Officer Guillermo Villaraigosa, but I used sharp elbows to get him out of the way just so I could be here today. So I am excited, and I've been looking forward to this and appreciate all of the members' warm welcome, and Carolyn for reaching out to me and making all of this happen. So I'll just jump right into it. There are a number of major big picture issues when it comes to youth justice, not only in Los Angeles County, but across California, nationally as well. So there are a number of things that are of interest, and I want to focus on just a few of them. I'll try and speak it with fairly broad strokes. Hopefully I'll be able to provoke a little bit of provoke a little bit of thought and be happy to answer any questions after I've provoked you. But I do want to again say I'm really happy to be here, and this is a privilege for me to join you today. I think that the biggest issue facing at least the Los Angeles County Probation Department right now these days is what's making the papers, and that is those are issues surrounding our running of juvenile institutions, specifically juvenile halls. I think everybody, if you're not aware, then hopefully you will be aware that running and operating a juvenile hall is a high liability. It's a very intensive. If you've never been in a juvenile hall, reach out to me and I'll arrange a tour. It is, it's something else. It's high risk youth, boys and girls, in confined settings. It is a secure facility. Previously and historically, the probation department has operated 3 juvenile halls, one up in Sylmar, known as Barry J. Neidorff Juvenile Hall, one in near the big general hospital on the east side of downtown LA, Central Juvenile Hall, which is the historic juvenile hall. And then the third juvenile hall is Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall, which is in Downey. And without getting into a lot of history, the State Board of Community Corrections, BSC, governs juvenile halls and the standards that are that must be met in order to have them suitable to house children. And for a number of different reasons, all concerning, back in the beginning of the first half of this year, the state found that 2 of those juvenile halls, the one in Sylmar and the one near Central Juvenile Hall, were unsuitable to house youth. So those they were found unsuitable. So the law requires that probation departments operate juvenile halls. So what the county did was ready back about 3-4 years ago, because of the number of kids we have in custody and other issues, other reasons, juvenile hall in Downey was closed and shuttered. And so when they found Central Juvenile Hall and Barry J. Neidorff Juvenile Hall unsuitable, we had to quickly make ready Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall in Downey. And so in July, we moved around 225, 250 kids, starting with Central Juvenile Hall, and then following that, Barry J. Neidorff Juvenile Hall, moved all of those kids from 2 juvenile halls into the 1 juvenile hall in Downey. There continue to be, there are a multitude of issues. A lot of this has to do with the findings of unsuitability. So we need to meet the state standards. And a lot of those center around staffing, safety, education, mental health, healthcare, getting kids to school, visiting with kids. And, frankly, there have been significant staffing issues, which make it difficult for us to operate the juvenile halls. And a number of reasons why the staffing is low. A lot of folks have been out due to injury, or they're light duty, or they're unable to perform that task. Those are the staff that work in the juvenile hall, and then Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've had a lot of people calling out ill. They can't go to work because they have COVID. So we've had staffing issues, which require our staff from our field operations, adult and juvenile, to work shifts inside of the juvenile halls, since legally they have to continue to operate. So right now we have probably, I don't know what the number is this morning, around 280-ish, between 280, 290 kids at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall in Downey. I think the capacity is just around 300. So we have most of the beds filled, and most of the units are 100% occupied. So there's always a room, a door of one of the living quarters that has an issue. So we're always trying to keep every bed available within the facility. But point being that most of our kids, all of our kids have been transferred into the juvenile hall that had previously been at the other two juvenile halls. So that's the number one big issue that our department is facing right now, is the transition from two juvenile halls to one. I will characterize it as being still a transition period, since you have kids coming from different areas, staff that are coming from different areas of the department, all trying to figure out how to make that transition flow well and maintain the services that, the educational and healthcare, mental health, transportation to court, or for medical appointments, mental health services. Gets a little complicated, but it's a microcosm of what's happening in our community. The kids that are in the juvenile halls, really, they're kids. They may have done something to get them there, but they're still human beings. They're still kids, and they still, need to be, taken care of. And so, we are continuing as a department to put most of our energy and effort into Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. The second issue that I want to bring up is that going back to the year 2020, it starts before then, but if you remember AB 109 back in 2010, 2011, where the state realigned the state prison system and sent a lot of the certain types and categories of adult offenders back to the counties, to jails, and for treatment in the community. Something similar happened starting in 2020, where the state realigned all of its youth that had formerly been in its division of juvenile justice facilities, which some of you may remember as the old California Youth Authority. The California Youth Authority became the state division of juvenile justice, and then starting in 2020 with legislation that passed, that would be Senate Bill 823, realigned the services. Basically, the state went out of the business of housing juvenile offenders and realigned those back to the counties, meaning they sent them back to the counties. So in Los Angeles County, what that meant was that we would no longer send kids to the state, and that a number of youth would be returning from the state to facilities in Los Angeles County. There are 3 facilities in the county that house those former DJJ, and now they're called Secure Youth Track. They're called Secure Youth Track Facilities, SYTF, Secure Youth Track Facilities. There are 3 facilities. One is the main facility is at our Old Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall, and that is where most of the post-adjudication kids that have already stood trial and have been their disposition or their sentences to SYTF. They are housed, most of them are housed at Barry J. Nydorf Juvenile Hall. They call it the Tri Academy now, because it's not really a juvenile hall, a Tri Academy. And I'll try to remember before I finish what the acronym Tri Academy stands for. All of our kids, let me back up a second. All of our kids who are pending adjudication or pending trial, they are all housed at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. Los Padrinos should not be housing any post-disposition or post-sentencing youth. So post-sentencing SYTF youth are mostly housed at the Tri-Academy in Sylmar. There also is a step down where we house kids at what is known as Campus Kilpatrick, and it's one of our former probation camp facilities up above in the Malibu Hills. So we have, I think there's room for 45 kids in SYTF youth and these are all males we're talking right now, at the Campus Kilpatrick facility in Malibu. And then our Dorothy Kirby Center, which is in the city of Commerce, East LA, has housing for 5 females or 5 girls that have been ordered to secure youth track. So there's been a major shift in the way the state had and now does not work with those youth that would have gone to the Division of Juvenile Justice. And so those youth now complete their programs. There are other step down programs, meaning they've done considerable amount of their time in one facility or another, and they're ready to reintegrate into the community and go into transitional housing programs. Some of them don't have a home to return to, so they go into, we're working on getting programs that are similar to our foster care environment and suitable placement facilities, trying to transition them back. Most of these youth are eligible to remain in custody till their 25th birthday, so it's a new population for probation, but they are young adults, but they're going to go home. And so we're trying to get them ready to, return to the community. So I think we have around 100 of those youth right now between our 3 facilities. I'd have to get you an exact number, but it's somewhere around 100 of those youth, and maybe a little bit more than that at this point. So those are the major things that are impacting the juvenile justice side of probation. There are a number of other elements, and I don't know how much time I have. Can somebody give me a time check? And I'll make sure.
You have about 6 minutes left.
Okay, so just briefly about what I do. I'm at the intersection of where the juvenile justice system meets the child welfare system. So I'm responsible for all of the youth that have delinquency or criminal cases in juvenile court in Los Angeles County that have been ordered to foster care. Some of those youth are dual status youth, where they have a case with the Department of Children and Family Services and the dependency court. We are Los Angeles County Probation is the 5th largest child welfare department in the state of California, after San Diego, Alameda, Santa Clara. Department of Children and Family Services, Los Angeles County, and Los Angeles County Probation are the 5 largest child welfare departments in the state. So we have youth who are in foster care. They live with either foster parents, so we call resource parents. They live in what are formerly known as group homes. We call them STRTPs. So we have, trying to think, about close to 200 kids in their STRTP is a short-term residential therapeutic program, formerly known as a group home. And so we have about 200 of those youth right now. We have a number of youth who have finished and they're off probation, and they are in extended foster care and can remain in extended foster care until they're 21 years old. I'm responsible, and we have youth who are commercially sexually exploited children. So I have our child trafficking unit, which is a great big deal and a huge concern. Our girls are victims of exploitation and sex trafficking, and highly vulnerable, really challenging, and very promising when we can all work together to try and keep those kids safe back in school with their families. So they're very, that's a vulnerable population. We work with developmentally disabled children. We are focusing on wellness. We focus on the best we can on healthcare, mental health care, just getting a pair of reading glasses that could never see the teacher at the front of the classroom or be able to read a book, tutoring programs, employment programs. We work with our regional center under AB 2083. We in Los Angeles County and all of the counties across the state work together in partnership in what is known as a system of care roundtable. So we work on difficult, challenging matters and see those as opportunities to make our system not a system of care, but a system that cares, that we can readily develop. Let me not say readily develop, but properly develop relationships across multiple stakeholders and multiple groups to make the system do what it's supposed to do, which is aid and assist young people and their families so they can thrive in our communities. We have a major initiative, we respond to major initiatives from our County Board of Supervisors, one of which is decarcerating our girls and not having them in our institutions, our juvenile halls or camps. That is a major point with us and with me, because between our sex trafficked girls, that is a challenge that we are up to the task to meet. So I'm going to let you know that we know that I'm going to leave it here, at least my portion of it before I get into questions and answers, is that we know that there are certain things that lead kids into the delinquency system. We know that the vast majority of our kids come to us through trauma, that they've experienced terrible things in their lives, boys and girls, families, communities, but the kids come to us informed by trauma. We know that where families break down and are dysfunctional, where education breaks down, it leads to delinquency, criminal behavior. More often than not, it's the research and literature tells us that. So the case plans and the way we go about our business in probation is to make sure that we are addressing those factors that we know we can change. We can change the dynamics within a family and strengthen families. We know that families can strengthen themselves, and we know that people can become more well-educated and ready to be economically self-sufficient and thrive in our communities. And so if we believe that people can change, be educated, families can become better, we can keep kids on track and away from this system. The best thing that we can do is pry the hands of the criminal justice system off of families so they can move forward independently and do well in their lives. I know that there are a few questions, but thank you for letting me go through what I just did, and happy to address anything you'd like me to.
Thank you so much, Paul. That was really helpful to give us a context of the justice system for juveniles in LA County. And I do have a couple of questions. One is, what is being done to prevent sex abuse of the youth?
Well, are you talking about in the community or in facilities?
Yeah, I believe it's in facilities. If that's incorrect,
no.
Mention that. Please let me know.
So we do operate under the guidelines of what is known as the Prison Rape Elimination Act, which goes back, at least, I'm going to say 15 years, where we are, it will come up in the paper where there are allegations, and those allegations and abuse of children in our facilities, of course, is completely intolerable. If it's youth on youth, or there are concerns about adults that are involved with that, it's intolerable, and we do our very best to not only prevent it, but if it ever becomes an allegation or rears its ugly head, then we deal with it. But in my experience, those things they do occur. I've never had like firsthand knowledge of any of that, but I know that we do have a coordinator of what is known as PREA, or the Prison Rape Elimination Act, in all of our facilities. Yeah.
Thank you. Are all of the kids at Los Angeles Padrinos and other 3 facilities from LA County?
Well, that's a very interesting question. If they're in the juvenile hall, then it means that they were arrested in Los Angeles County, but their actual legal residence may be somewhere else. We have, so we will have a kid from Los Angeles County that commits a crime in San Bernardino County. Sorry, Professor. But the trial, because of the way it's set up for witnesses and victims, would occur in the place of jurisdiction where the crime actually occurred. And if there are any attorneys on the call here that know better than I do, please let me know. But what will happen is we'll have a kid from some county. We just had kids here from Las Vegas even that committed their crimes here. Once their case is over, we will return them to their jurisdiction.
Thank you. And this is sort of a double-pronged, but would you mind describing what programs are available to the kids in juvenile halls, both the ones have been adjudicated and the ones who are still awaiting adjudication? And do you work with the LA County Office of Ed to provide those services? So if you would just give us an overview of the services.
So educational services in our juvenile halls and camps are all provided by the Los Angeles County Office of Education. We have a lot of kids that have graduated from high school, and they also take online college courses, especially our secure youth track kids. So LA County Office of Education, or LACO for short, certainly is the primary authoritative body to deliver education. There are schools within units at Los Padrinos Juvenile Hall. There is a school. There's one school. There's a school on the campus as well that's outside of the units where the kids go to school, and then there's a separate school where the girls go. So yeah, the education, special education, absolutely would be the pretty much the foundation of what we want to be able to do. There are various other programs to supplement education in the juvenile hall. So, I mean, arts and music programs in the juvenile hall. I'm with a nonprofit organization, a chair nonprofit organization. You can write this down, Jail Guitar Doors, which brings, they were founded, you can Google it. They were founded to bring musical instruments, guitars, to incarcerated people in Europe and across North America. And they do arts and music programming been doing arts and music programming in our juvenile halls and camps. And, we're expanding that within Los Padrinos. We have the program, they bring in professional musical instructors, and they, it's not about guitar lessons, but it's about taking a young person's ability to express themselves and moving them hopefully from where they are with anger or grief or trauma, and filling their hearts with something more positive and productive and hope. So there are arts and healing programs throughout. This is certainly the case in our suitable placement facilities, where we're focused on therapy and treatment and those types of experiences for the kids. So there are a range of things that will treat those kids, give them as much as a normalized experience, if you want to call it that, in juvenile halls they would experience in the community.
So with the counseling, who would be providing those kinds of services, therapy and counseling?
Okay, in the juvenile halls, absolutely, this would be the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. So they are embedded. We have multiple partnerships across the county agencies, but Department of Mental Health, LA County Office of Education would be key partners within our juvenile halls and our facilities and our secure youth track facility as well.
Thank you. Next question. How can drugs be prevented from entering the youth facilities?
Oh goodness, that's a tough one. The issue is tough how they keep making it in there, but just last week, one of my staff who was working in the juvenile hall if there's a visit, there's not supposed to be any touching. And one of my staff observed an exchange between a parent and a kid where they gave the kid a bag or something, and it had a whole bunch of items in there, marijuana candy, vaping pens, a bunch of stuff. And they were caught, and the parents, would be referred to, the district attorney for that. But certainly it is very, very difficult. There are allegations that, and things that are being investigated where, it could be that a staff member or a teacher or a nurse or somebody brings something into the facility. And those are allegations I, obviously couldn't get into it, but those are things that we're extremely concerned about and mindful of. I'll just tell you straight, I'm not gonna, if the chief was in my seat right now, he'd be telling you that this is a major concern of ours and intolerable that we would allow that to happen. So, on the other side, we have people that would, go up around the outside of the facility and throw something over the fence or use a little drone. Like Amazon might drop it on your driveway, that they will drop something in the facility. So we have to have enough staffing and enough technology and the ability to, prevent it.
Thank you.
I will tell you that one of the things I am most fearful of, and it hasn't come up in this conversation, is fentanyl. And so whether it's fentanyl in the community or fentanyl in our facilities or however people get it, deadly, and I don't want anybody to underestimate how terrible what I will call the plague of fentanyl is right now.
Thank you. Next question. What is the difference in function between youth camps and juvenile halls?
That's a softball, Carolyn. Okay, so juvenile halls generally can be considered to be like a county jail, where the parallel being that there are people who are waiting in juvenile hall to go on trial. They're pending trial or adjudication. The youth camps are basically for young people who that is the disposition or the sentence. So they've, stolen a car as an example. They'll wait in juvenile hall until the end of their trial period. Their sentence or their disposition is to a juvenile youth camp. If you've committed a very violent felony right now, in order to get admitted into juvenile hall, I believe you have to commit. This is homework for all the ladies and all the members of the league right now. Welfare and Institution Code Section 707, subsection B, describes serious and violent felonies. And in order to even be admitted into juvenile hall right now, you would need to commit a felony like murder, mayhem, kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon resulting in injury, carjacking, rape, arson, firing a weapon into an inhabited dwelling. Those are the crimes that will get you detained in juvenile hall right now. It's not an exhaustive list. I'm just going off the top of my head, but those are, if you are caught driving a stolen car, you're highly likely not to be admitted into juvenile hall. And if your parent refuses to come and pick you up, you'll probably be released to the Department of Children and Family Services. So the difference is that juvenile hall is where you wait to go on trial. Camp is where you go after trial, or secure youth trial. Yeah.
Thank you. How many children commit their crimes at school that get them to juvenile hall versus committing them other places?
We would say it's a very small percentage. I know we have Youth Law Center, and I know that we have Department of Youth Development, but we have diversion programs and citation programs where most of our kids are cited and released if law enforcement takes them into custody or arrests them. So most kids don't even go to juvenile hall to be released. They're cited and released in the community. And even if they come to us to probation, they're not going to go to juvenile hall. Now, when you say crimes, I mentioned earlier, I think that my mom was a probation officer, if I haven't mentioned it yet. And one of my friends growing up was on probation for possession of one marijuana joint in school. Okay. And my mom was her probation officer. That was a crime back in 1975, right? Junior high, middle school for me, it was 1975. Now, at least with the Los Angeles Unified School District, I think that they've taken school police off of their campuses as the main law enforcement agency. So, do crimes occur on and around campus? Yeah, yes, they do. Do most of those cases come to us? Pretty few and far between. We're going to see the probation. We'll see. I mean, if you've stolen the principal's car, yeah, you'll probably be arrested. But it's probably a minority of the cases overall. You will have cases. It's going to be a reflection of the community. So, but there is campus violence, and I will tell you that we had probation officers on campus for a couple of generations in our school-based program. That tide has turned, and we don't no longer have over 100 high schools in LA County and 50 middle schools in LA County with probation officers trying to prevent kids from getting involved with criminal behavior, keeping them on track in school. I'm going to take it back to what I said about the causal model. We have probation officers on campus, and we no longer do, but it was meant to keep kids in school, safely in school, and to help support families. So those are the things we focus on now in our community every day.
Thank you. We have time just for a few more. The next question, you refer to family education. Is it mandatory before the youth return home?
Family, I don't know in what context I said family education, but what we do is we try to strengthen families, but you will often find the case that the court has ordered parenting classes. I don't know if there is any efficacy to the concept of parenting classes. One thing I will tell you is that I've never met a parent that didn't love their child and want to be a good parent, right? We also have a lot of kids who are caught up in the dependency court system at the same time they're engaged with the probation system. And so what we're trying to do is look at ways to put programs within the home. I haven't mentioned what is known as the Family First Prevention Services Act, but there are certain evidence-based programs that are approved by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families. Two of those programs, one is known as multi-systemic therapy, one is known as functional family therapy, where you have a trained practitioner who goes into the home to either strengthen that kid's social ecology and mitigate stress and dysfunction and bring hope to the family so they can have peace and tranquility within the house. And we also have programs, a program called functional family therapy that I'm a huge fan of, where we intentionally, and I have probation officers in my own operation that will go into the home, engage the family, motivate the family, look towards ways to heal or to address whatever trauma or issues, dysfunction they may be experiencing, and then turn that into generalized behavior, positive and learning coping skills and the way to handle stress and pressure. So those things we put into place within the home, within the county, very positive and productive, and really, we just entered into an agreement with LA County Department of Mental Health to expand multi-systemic therapy and functional family therapy more broadly across the county. At least, I'm sorry, let me just say, we're in a pilot phase in not across the county, two particular areas in the county. If you're familiar with the service plan area, it'd be service plan areas 2 and 6. So the Valley, San Fernando Valley region, South Los Angeles region as a
Thank you.
pilot.
And one last question, because I want to honor our other speakers as well. Have Scared Straight programs been found to work?
No, they have not. The evidence, research and evidence shows that Scared Straight programs are counterproductive and don't work.
Okay, well, thank you so very much. We've learned a lot, and I know that people are have learned a lot from this, and we'll probably have lots more questions as well. But thank you. You are welcome to stay if you would like. I know it's a Saturday. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate all of you. Appreciate my fellow panelists' patience. Letting me go first. But I'm thrilled to be here, and I'll stick around for a little while. Then I'll put into the chat when I need to excuse myself. So thank you very much,
Thank
Carolyn,
you.
and everybody from the League of Women Voters. Thank you so much for having me. Very kind of you.
So it's my honor now to introduce Erin Palacios. I have to say that I had 3 people respond to say, oh, I want to come to this because Erin is speaking. So there's been quite some anticipation of having her speak. She's a senior attorney at the Youth Law Center. She's focused on the intersection points of multiple youth serving agencies, and her work is centered on the critical reinvestment of resources required to replace punitive delinquency responses with community-based systems of care. In partnership with the Young Women's Freedom Center, Erin works to support and build power for directly impacted people, advocating to create and reimagine systems that primarily value the children, families, and the communities to which they belong. Prior to joining the Youth Law Center, she was project coordinator for the Youth Justice Project at Bay Area Legal Aid. She's worked to provide comprehensive civil legal services to people who can't pay for them themselves. Thank you so very much, Erin, for speaking with us.
Thank you. I will first say I really appreciate the invitation. It's not as often that I get invited to speak to people who are outside of the working sphere that I'm in. And I always enjoy that because I think more people need to know about what's going on in youth justice and what's going on with our children generally. I have some slides, but just before I begin with the slides, I only have a couple of them. I want to start by saying that the things I'll talk about and the perspective that I bring to this work is going to sound very different from Mr. Vinetz, and I will note that up front, and I want to make very clear that I don't mean it in any way that is accusatory or attacking, and I firmly believe that though I don't know him personally, I know of his work, and I firmly believe that at the end of the day, we both want the same thing for young people, which is for them to be safe and taken care of and thriving in their family homes and with their communities. We come at it from different places and we have different responsibilities, but I do believe that about many of the people I interact with in the systems, even if we can't get to that place right away. So before I say anything else, I wanted to make sure everybody understood that part of my perspective. I also will say that I was very excited to hear that Mr. Vinetz works in the overlap of juvenile justice and child welfare, because compulsive is probably a good word to use with me. I get pretty compulsive about trying to figure things out and obsessive about certain things, and the overlap and the options available to young people who cross between systems is one of my obsessions in the law and in service provision. And with that, I will take a quick moment and just share these slides, and hopefully I can do this in a way that is almost seamless. I think hopefully people can see that. And I'll say, I see there being these kind of major topics to think about in juvenile justice and youth justice. And I'm going to go back and forth between the term youth justice and juvenile justice, which just kind of dates me in when I started the practice, because youth justice is the term that we are using and moving towards, because juvenile justice has a lot of connotations, but I'm still making that journey when I'm speaking more extemporaneously. Right now, we're seeing major shifts and changes in the youth justice field. And I want to say, I do not think that that is explaining at all what we are seeing in Los Angeles or elsewhere. There are a lot of changes to grapple with. There's a lot of big things to look at, but the problems that we are seeing are systemic, deeply entrenched, long existing problems that are not caused by the changes that we are seeing. One of the things that we have to struggle with in California, and that I think we do not own yet as a state, but we need to own, is there's no adequate mechanism of oversight in place. And at every turn where oversight is attempted, it meets with significant opposition from law enforcement, probation departments, and counties, and the plethora of lobbying organizations that surround them. That includes something that is sitting on the governor's desk right now. We have failed overall, and this is not specific to Los Angeles, this is not specific even to California, but it is critical in Los Angeles at this moment. We failed to effectively partner with the community-based providers and the families and the communities from which these children come in order to provide services and to establish alternatives. That failure is both an investment. As much as we invest in the youth justice system, we invest a very small fraction of it in community-based alternatives in comparison to what we invest in incarceration. And we don't partner. So even to the extent we do invest, it becomes a very paternalistic system in which community partners are told how they need to operate and what they need to do and aren't allowed to innovate. And I understand that allowing community partners to innovate presents certain challenges in the public sphere where there's liability and other things, but there are ways to do it, and it is not something that we prioritize. And we also don't bring communities to the table to do the planning. They're often brought to the table to comment or to give public comment or to sit and listen, and not given a voting right or a seat at the table to actually go through the options and understand what's there and help select what might be right for their community. That became very clear over the last few years when there was a new law that required some of that planning and still community members weren't brought to the table. I think that's probably one of the most critical things we need to do in order to make serious change. And the reason for that is, if we don't do that, we're always going to be making decisions about other people's children instead of bringing them to the table and helping them get the resources that they need to make effective decisions for their own children. And I think most of us can agree. As a parent, I certainly hold this belief that we all have our own children's best interests at heart far more than anybody else ever will. As much as I hold the interest of all children dear, I know, if I'm being honest, I would probably burn the earth to save my own children. And I think a lot of parents feel that way. And because of that, they need to be the ones who are there helping make decisions about those children because they care about them most deeply. And they will weigh their interests above all else, which is what we need. And I say all of this, and it sounds like I think we're only failing and maybe there's nothing we can do. And I do think there are things that we can do. And I think there are opportunities for change, both across the state and in Los Angeles. There's a lot of discussion about Los Angeles right now, and it almost seems like we should throw our hands up and just give up because there's nothing that can be done. I do not believe that. If I did, I would be wasting a lot of time in the job that I do. But I am, despite the fact that I'm going to talk about a lot of problems, an optimist. And I think that we can partner for change. I think there are opportunities, obviously, to partner with the community, which is what I'm saying. But I also think there are places where people like myself and community members really want to be partnering with probation because everything has to move in phases. As much as I want change yesterday, and I will demand it tomorrow. I know that it isn't coming overnight, and sometimes change overnight is dangerous. And I'm hoping that this is going to let me. When I think about areas of focus and areas of change, I think we have kind of three main buckets of consideration. There are many more, but three that we could possibly even get to in 15 minutes. And those are the community-based alternatives and solutions that need to be developed. And I'm going to say what I should have said at the beginning, which is I have two children who are in the house with me today. So if you hear background noise, that's what that is. And there's no way around that for me. My partner is doing his best to manage them, but one never knows. The community-based alternatives is going to require, like I said, community partnership. It's going to require creating alternatives to detention. And that doesn't just mean STRTPs and group homes. It means using resources that are currently available, some of which Mr. Vinitz touched on, to develop solutions, to use new money. There's been a $5 to $8 billion, depending on where we are in the cycle, investment in Medi-Cal in the state of California to radically change how it can be leveraged and used and what kinds of resources we can develop with that funding. Part of that investment has been for capacity building at the county level. That money is not getting to the right places, but it does need to eventually. Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to take another several $billion investment once we realize that we put it in the wrong places. But developing those alternatives, having community supports in place, allowing those supports to take place in a young person's home, whether it be to keep young people out of detention or to get young people out of detention or to avoid questions of detention altogether, which would be ideal. Those things are available. That new Medi-Cal development is a first in the nation opportunity. It's called CalAIM. And one of the things that it does is it makes all young people who are involved in the juvenile justice, child welfare, or system or experiencing homelessness within a certain definition eligible for what we call specialty mental health services. And that is a huge entitlement for children 0 to 21. And we often use the acronym EPSDT. It stands for Early Periodic Screening, Diagnosis, and Treatment. It's a very broad range of services and a very broad range of services that also could be created to provide for those young people. And it has new options for providing those services using community members and community partners. So that needs to be developed and built out. It also allows for the first time for Medi-Cal to be billed prior to a young person leaving detention, because there is a long existing rule against using Medicaid in carceral facilities, but it allows it for a time period before a person leaves one of those facilities in order to create a meaningful reentry plan, to bring community providers in to begin working with a person. This includes a young person, I'm saying people because it also exists on the adult side, to turn Medi-Cal back on so that it can be billed, to allow those community providers to work inside of a facility with that young person so that it can be more seamless coming out. There are options there that we need to develop. And those options allow us, there are also options in the child welfare space. We collectively sort of refer to them as the complex care alternatives. I would love to someday be invited back to talk about the child welfare reforms and the complex care initiatives and all of the things that could be leveraged into juvenile justice, but that are certainly opportunities that we need to take major advantage of in the child welfare space. Those were built in large part, almost entirely, but in large part in response to the closure of out-of-state placement. In full disclosure, the Youth Law Center was active in trying to close those out-of-state placement facilities, those prior group homes, for many, many years. But in 2020, the very tragic death of Cornelius Frederick at a facility in Michigan called Lakeside Academy brought a lot of it to light. And I say, also unfortunate is that's what's created the opportunity for us to push the state to address what were long known abuses in those facilities. California had youth sent all over the state, all over the country in these facilities, some of which were basically prison-like facilities. One of them actually was on the grounds of a adult prison and sharing a meal service with an adult prison, but somehow considered a foster care alternative. Those were shut down in 2020 and presented certain challenges for folks using them as alternatives to custody. Those weren't real alternatives in my mind because they were prison-like as well, but I understand that it presented those challenges. Built out of that, though, are a range of options that can be used to serve young people who have those high-level needs. I won't say too much more about that because I could talk about that for days. All of the solutions that are available, all the opportunities, all of the new money, all of the new sort of packages that are being put forth by the state and the federal government aren't new ideas, and they aren't coming from nowhere. They are firmly tied to the last 30, 40 years of research in children's mental health and service delivery that we sort of generally refer to as the systems of care reforms. They require a lot of coordination between systems. They look at centering children and families as the decision makers in their own lives and trying to make sure that whatever we do, however we work, we are keeping their needs and the most efficient and effective way for them to receive services at front and center, because otherwise we spend a lot of money and are essentially throwing spaghetti at a wall and frankly doing more harm. They all also give us the opportunity to aim at the core social drivers of system involvement: childhood poverty, childhood maltreatment, lack of education, connection, lack of mental health services, many other things that go on there. I'm leaving out major questions of racism, gender discrimination, sexual orientation discrimination. Those are all in there as well. The money isn't aimed at that, but those are other core things that need to be addressed as we look at the system, especially the juvenile justice system, which largely is a response to children of color and not children overall. Another major bucket we have is juvenile facilities. I would say, and it's me being tame, that they are a local, state, and national shame. And we should all feel shame in what they are. They lack rehabilitation and treatment. There is almost no programming to speak of in California's facilities right now. I, in my spare evening time, read the reports of the Board of State and Community Corrections, which is what passes for oversight in the state of California. And almost uniformly, those reports, despite not always saying that facilities are not compliant, note a lack of adequate programming, a lack of programming that is age appropriate. Many of the young people in secure youth treatment facilities right now are spending long periods of their days watching TV. And that in and of itself is horrifying, particularly given that parents of means and parents with options spend so much time just trying to limit TV. And what we're doing is putting children in prison-like facilities for rehabilitation and actually having them watch TV. It becomes even worse when you read the reports and find out that the television programming is not even considered to be age appropriate. I looked at one facility recently where it turned out that for quite some time, the children sat watching Shark Week on the Discovery Channel in reruns. That is not at all what I think the public expects of professionals who are detaining children for their own supposed rehabilitation and treatment. It's not what the state theoretically expects. I say theoretically because it's not really overseeing, so you can't say that you're expecting something if you're just looking the other way. And it's not even what the Constitution requires. The Constitution and we often think of the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, as defining the minimum standard, but for children, it's actually the 14th Amendment, due process, that defines the minimum standard, because they're not considered convicted criminals. They remain in a civil legal situation, and they're entitled to rehabilitation and treatment at a minimum level, which they are not receiving. And I think if we were to really be honest, we would be saying well, all of the things that we see for lists of programming in these facilities are nice, but it's a little bit like when you buy something online and then it arrives at your house and it doesn't look anything like what you saw in the picture, and it doesn't resemble anything like what the description was when you purchased it. That is my reaction when I go into the facilities. I read almost everything I can read before I go into a facility, whether it be a group home or a shelter or a juvenile facility. And then I go in and I know I'm not going to see what I read about, but it's usually startlingly worse, even though I've been in so many. That is the way it works when we think of facilities, no matter what we see on paper. That is not what you get when you go in. I encourage everybody to go take a tour, though I don't like to think of them as tours because, you know, there are children in there, and I don't think of them as, you know, something that you can tour. But I do think it's something that you should acquaint yourself with, something that you should witness is a better, I think, a way to see it. And when you do, I think the only way to assess those facilities that I know is to think, would this be okay if this was my child? The answer is undoubtedly no. And that is the standard that I hold them to. It is not the standard the state holds them to, or even the Constitution, but it is the standard I hold them to, and that I think every member of the public should. No one should ever be planning for, overseeing, or interacting at all with a juvenile facility or the juvenile system without holding it to a standard that they would be holding it to if it were their child. All children deserve that, and all of these children are somebody's child. These facilities in Los Angeles have lists of programming. I reviewed them this week, partly to prepare to come here. And I was noting that all of the programming listed for the facilities, including the SYTF, sound great. But then if you look closely, most of them also say next to them that they are pending either funding or a new contract or some new planning. And I'm also going to apologize. I'm a little fidgety because I have thrown my back out a bit over time, and it sometimes acts up. They also, some say that they are inactive. I'm not sure why they're inactive or if they ever have a plan to be active again. Some are on hold. Very few are operating. And most of the ones that are operated by probation, not by community partners, not by the mental health professionals you might want, not by additional resources, but by probation officers being trained to do that. And I understand that that's sometimes what they have, but that's not good enough. That's not the right kind of training to provide the level of support that some of our most vulnerable children need. The last thing I'll say about the facilities for the moment is that they cost a fortune, an absolute fortune. In some counties, they cost as much as $1 million a year per child. And there's absolutely no explanation for why that is what we get for $1 million a year per child. And there can be no explanation. Oh, see, this is why I make slides that usually that have timers on them. Because of that, and that's also why I make slides that give me mostly what I can do. I'm going to switch to the state oversight. Because right now we're looking at 2 facilities in Los Angeles that have been issued non-compliance again. And I have to say, we've been here before. The federal government sued them in 2003. They sued them again in 2008. In 2020, there was an investigation by the Board of State and Community Corrections that did not end in a non-compliance notice until more than 6 months later in 2021. In 2021, the Attorney General also sued and entered a stipulated judgment. In 2023, we saw non-compliance and unsuitability again at Barry J. and Central Juvenile Halls. They closed Central Juvenile Hall and reopened Los Padrinos in the wake of being forced to close those juvenile halls. Los Padrinos itself was closed in the wake of rampant sex abuse scandals and abuse going on in that facility. After the unsuitability in 2023, the Attorney General then reopened the case to do enforcement. That case is ongoing. There are cases right now dealing with the historic sex abuse in the child welfare and juvenile justice systems in Los Angeles that people think could be about a $3 billion lawsuit that is pending. The Office of the Inspector General has said that there are major issues with abuse, with fentanyl use. I will second the fentanyl use issue that I am aware of. There are a couple of probation staff who are on leave. It is not my understanding that probation staff are referred to the district attorney for arrest the same way a family member might be when they bring drugs into a facility, which I take issue with because I think they owed an even greater duty. And those staff, I believe, were found to be bringing fentanyl into the facilities and might be pending investigation, but that takes a lot. So I'm pretty sure they were found bringing something in, though that doesn't tend to make the public. There have been major abuses of children, including someone asked about sex abuse. There was a case that happened when the children were being moved by the sheriff's office in response to a fire, the fires. They were being evacuated, put on buses by the sheriff's department, driven, and a young person came off that bus, a 14-year-old, having experienced a horrifying sexual assault, and he came out without his clothes on. And there was a sheriff's officer on that bus that did not stop it. And the reason it's even known about is the judge had issued orders prior regarding the evacuation and the fires to try to avoid just this situation, and found out about it later. And it made all of the papers. I wouldn't share that in that particular thing, except it already made all of the papers. So where are we right now? We're waiting on building alternatives. I think there are a few pathways to higher education. The Young Women's Freedom Center has an office in Los Angeles. They are a fantastic partner and building new options for young people. LA is building safe and secure healing centers. I think we need to push for accountability within the facilities. There's a Juvenile Justice Commission. There's voting rights advocacy that we think needs to be done even for the young people in the facilities. The Department of Youth and Family Development is taking over, and I think that's in LA for certain funding coming up. And I think that's a way to ensure community oversight and county planning of spending. There's also a regulatory revision process for Titles 15 and 24 going on right now. Those are the minimum standards for juvenile facilities. We're going to have to demand better of those standards, better of what the board does for Los Angeles in terms of oversight. And frankly, we're going to have to change the makeup of that board because it is largely made up of sheriffs, probation officers, and other law enforcement officers, many of whom run the kinds of facilities that are being overseen. And those are just a few options we have. I'm also just going to put up this slide, which is of our flyer, where it's a little bit of a plug. When realignment happened, it meant that the counties had a lot more youth who are older in these facilities. Those youth have the right to vote, and there's nothing stopping that right. The juvenile delinquency finding does not operate like a criminal conviction to impact your voting. So getting young people registered, getting them engaged and understanding the issues and giving them the opportunity to vote is critical. And that's a project that we are currently working on, and reaching out to probation offices to see if we can help figure out some systems to do that, because there are obstacles and hurdles, and that is something we would love help with across the state and in LA County. And it seemed like a good thing to bring up here. I will stop because I've rambled a little bit, but it's obviously a topic that's near to my heart, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I will send this flyer after, just in case you want to send it out after the present.
Thank you so much, Erin. And please forgive me, but Refugio is here and he has to leave at 11. So we're going to let him speak and then we'll go back to your questions. Okay. So if you guys will just start putting your questions in the Q&A, and we will go to our next speaker. Refugio Valle is a Los Angeles County native, having grown up in the Antelope Valley. He has served as director of the Los Angeles County's youth diversion efforts since 2019, first as director of the Department of Youth Services, Division of Youth Diversion and Development, and now as Diversion Program Development Director in the Department of Youth Development. He previously served the city of Los Angeles in the mayor's office of gang reduction and development. Welcome, Refugio. We appreciate you so coming along. And you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Yes, of course. Good morning. Good morning. So my name is Refugio Valle, Director of Youth Diversion in the Department of Youth Development. Should I pull up my own slides? Is that easiest? So yeah, thanks again. I will try to make arrangements to see if I can hop back on for Q&A. I don't want to just speak and go. So I'll try to do that, but I'll run through the slides I have today. I just want to introduce the work of the LA County Department of Youth Development, a department that was stood up in July of 2022. So we're just over a year old, stood up here in the county. as an effort to stand up a Care First alternative for young people in the county, for young people specifically who come into contact with the justice system, but also to really envision to be a department that will support all young people from ever getting to the point where they have a contact with the justice system. So our mission is to support the development of young people in Los Angeles County. We're going to be coordinating and building capacity for just a wide range of youth development services, opportunities, supports, and other Care First efforts. And our goal, our main goal is to equitably reduce justice system involvement by young people in LA County. So, this new department in the county, it represents a structural investment in youth development. And again, we're prioritizing equity, healing, and restorative practices throughout all of our work. The 4 different buckets of work that you see here in the department are youth development, youth diversion, reentry, housing, and employment, and then research and coordination. These are the 4 areas that the department is currently structured to support. We have different teams supporting each of these efforts. In the youth development area, we're equitably investing in advancing youth development opportunities, youth diversion work, which has been standing since 2019 in LA County and transitioned into the Department of Youth Development. We're providing diversion opportunities as an alternative to traditional system involvement. We take referrals from law enforcement agencies all around the county, including the DA's office. I'll talk more about where we're at with that work in a bit. And then reentry, housing, and employment, where we're supporting people who are or were detained in juvenile halls and camps. We're currently working at Los Padrinos, at Camp Kilpatrick, and at Barry J. Nydorf through a Credible Messenger program, providing mentorship from folks that have lived experience in those placement settings to support the young people that are there, and also to support them in preparing for the return to community. And then we have our research and coordination team. It's focused on managing policy, on analysis, on data, data tracking, data analysis, looking at outcomes, and also helping guide our outreach with community and making sure that we are incorporating community in our decision-making processes throughout all of our work. And at the bottom of the slide, you'll see our formal, a bit more formal description of what we're doing across all of these areas. And so on the youth development front, we're reflecting recommendations that have come from the Youth Justice Advisory Group. Folks may not be familiar. Back in 2020, there was a youth justice work group that came together and was tasked with developing this Care First model for working with young people in LA County. That group presented the Youth Justice Reimagined report, which has really been the catalyst now for the creation of the Department of Youth Development, but also is our roadmap in terms of our work. So we're, as a youth development unit, really working to reflect the recommendations that have come out of the Youth Justice Reimagined report, that continue to come out of what is now the Youth Justice Advisory Group, which is a group of community stakeholders that's helping guide the vision and helping to inform the department in terms of how we carry out the recommendations that were previously presented, how it looks like once we start getting into implementation. And we're in the process of developing models for what are going to be called regional youth development networks. So networks where we are coordinating, funding all types of different resources in communities, place-based, according to the needs of that specific community, to make sure that people in that community have access, that we're increasing access, that we're increasing awareness, and really bolstering what might already be there, filling gaps where they exist, and again throughout this process engaging with partners, with community leaders, folks who really know these communities, so that we are providing services that make sense for the young people there. And when we say community leaders, community partners, we are in large part also talking about young people, incorporating young people in all of these processes. On the youth division front, like I said, we've been in existence since 2019. We've been scaling up, meaning building additional partnerships. We started working with 7 law enforcement agencies here in the county. We're now at about 15 that are actively referring, which includes we're at every sheriff station. We're partnered with every sheriff station in the county, so all 20, I believe 23. And we're about to launch with all 21 of LAPD's stations. So those are the two largest systems, and then we have 13 additional law enforcement, small city departments that we partner with, or medium-sized cities, and are working our way up to building partnerships with the vast majority of the law enforcement agencies here in the county. I think we're in the process of doing outreach. We have at least another 20 that have already said yes. We're just now building agreements with them. So by the end of this year, we should be working with about 35, 37, maybe up to around 40 of the law enforcement agencies in LA County. And we're also beginning planning to expand the diversion effort to create partnerships with schools. So, schools are one of the locations where the biggest amount of youth contacts with law enforcement take place, where they originate in and around school campuses. So we want to start building out a network so we can start upstreaming and hopefully avoid even that initial law enforcement contact, and maybe take referrals directly from schools in lieu of them contacting law enforcement, or even in lieu of maybe some disciplinary actions. So we'll be working with local school districts. Initially, we're going to launch that work in the Centinela Valley because of some board motions that have passed, but we'll be looking to quickly expand that out. I should maybe go back and say that our youth development networks that I've talked about are going to launch with 3 initial focus areas, those being an area in South LA, East LA, and the Antelope Valley. And then quickly going to be also incorporating some work in the Pacoima area and in Long Beach. And the idea is that those will be the initial areas, but that work will then quickly begin to expand and grow so that we're, quickly meeting needs in other areas of the county with high need, but also eventually and hopefully quickly have this level of support in every community in the county, because we know that there are levels of need in every community here in the county. And then the reentry housing and employment team in the department, we're currently partnering with probation and other partners to incorporate what I mentioned earlier, credible messengers programming for young people in halls and camps. We're at those 3 locations. We're expanding. We have a couple of providers that are currently in those facilities that I mentioned, Kilpatrick, Najdorf, and Los Padrinos. The goal is to provide as much coverage throughout the day. So this isn't just programming where folks are in for 2 hours a day or 1 hour a day. The goal is for folks to be there where we're covering at least 10 to 12 hours of the day, to provide active engagement with young people, to support with just the overall climate in these settings, so young people can feel safe and can grow and can again be prepared to come out back into community. So that will soon be partnered with sort of credible messenger efforts also out in community, so that folks are on the ground ready to receive young people as they're coming back, ready to support them and connecting with whatever types of resources they need out in the community to be successful. And we're also supporting the Youth Justice Advisory Group's gender responsive work group. So we have a new provider that's going to be coming in that's going to be focused on working with young women and gender expansive youth that are detained. And the goal of that gender responsive work group is really to eliminate the use of incarceration for girls and gender expansive youth. So a lot of work is being done figuring out where there are opportunities to continue to lower the number of girls and gender expansive youth that are being detained, to find alternatives, to potentially make sure that more of those young people are being diverted up front to our diversion partners. So just trying to take a holistic look at how we can eliminate the use of incarceration for girls and gender expansive youth. And as directed by the Board of Supervisors, we're taking the lead on youth development care coordination for all young people in halls, camps, and the SYTF facilities as they transition back to the community, after they've spent time in these carceral settings. And lastly, the coordination and innovation team mentioned earlier, they're really focused on advancing shared learning through youth development research, through program evaluation. They're there to really inform the work of our department. They support local and statewide policy efforts and have been leading on working with other county partners around a legislative strategy to align with the goals of the department, the goals that the board has set for the department. And that includes, current proposals to amend the Welfare Institutions Code to strengthen presumption of youth diversion in lieu of arrest. So wanting to sort of shift that dynamic around diversion to rather than it being an option to divert instead of rest, or like the other way around, that diversion would be the primary action taken when a young person comes into law enforcement for those offense types that are eligible for diversion. And then, continuing to collaborate with youth leaders, with community county partners to support the program, and policy design and coordination. Our department is really trying to be just more engaged with community, be more public facing and public engaging, and making sure that we are incorporating and trying to align with community needs all around the county, and not sort of cookie cutting interventions or cookie cutting what we think as solutions, making sure that those are being tailored to community by community. Yeah, that's our department. That's the work that we're focused on right now. We continue to grow. We've been growing in terms of staffing, been growing in terms of work. I'm going to pause there. I do have to jump quickly, but I'm going to try and jump back onto the call in a few minutes if I can.
Okay, thank you so much, Refugio. We hope that you can come back. We would love to hear you speak more. Thank you so much. Okay, let's go back to questions. We have several questions. One of the questions, Aaron, would you mind unmuting and letting us see you again? I asked her to do that. Sorry. In terms of your view of probation facilities, what would you have asked Paul Vinitz about the facilities? I think Paul might still be on. Yeah, so you're muted.
I just unmuted. I honestly get a lot of opportunities to ask about the facilities, so it's always a little tricky for me. I think the main question I have would be what probation is doing right now to bring more community partners in. I think that's a critical piece, and what it's doing to frankly oversee its own staff. I think there are a lot of issues right now, and I'm not going to say that I think it's all probation officers. It's not, but there are some that have been found bringing in narcotics. There are some who have sort of histories of abuse, and the most recent reports from both facilities from the BSCC note that young people say we need more of a certain kind of staff because they're expressing that they feel safer on certain shifts than others. And I think that's largely because of the staff's treatment of them on those shifts, that they're feeling safer with those staff. Those staff are probably better connected to them, paying a little more attention, having a better relationship with the young people. So what are we doing to figure out what is it that those staff are doing that's making those young people feel safer? So staff oversight, in addition to more staff, finding out what staff that are connecting with youth and doing well with youth, what are they doing, and how are we moving that training to other staff or hiring staff more like that? And then what are we doing to get the communities in there to provide the programming and treatment that is needed?
Paul, did you want to answer, or do you want to not?
Yeah, I'll tackle some of this. I think that when I opened up, I think in full disclosure, I've never run a facility. Last time I worked in one was 1994. I was there when they brought the first busload of kids. I was in a unit at Los Padrinos when they brought the first units of kids over in July, early July, and bore witness to all of this, and was there and in July, August, September. I probably spent more time working in those facilities than I have my previous 37 years. So I have a good sense, but I've never run one before, and I don't think on the best day I'll ever be able to run one. All that said, I will never come here in front of you or anybody and act defensively. Most of what's being said is true, although anecdotal. I don't think there might be systemic issues or things that Aaron and I will have to understand that we're not going to see eye to eye on, for sure. Staffing stability and staffing consistency is a major issue. When you're with the same people each and every day, staff don't feel safe. Staff are assaulted constantly. Every day I see the reports that staff are assaulted. One of my best buddies who I grew up with tried just opened a door for a kid and came away with a broken jaw. We have staff that are injured. They're frankly, the staff are afraid of the kids, and I can't say I blame them because, we don't prosecute those cases by and large. So the kids feel like they get a pass if they assault staff. This creates a situation where, broadly staff don't feel safe going to work. Okay, and I think that's understandable. And if you were in those shoes, you probably would feel the same way. I agree with Erin that I 100% agree with her that I want all of our facilities to be considered as though it would be our own child residing in there. So when we have stable staffing and, if you're around the same people every day and they work together as a team, certainly you're going to have more consistency, reliability, predictability, and the kids don't tend to cope well when it's unstable and inconsistent. When there's a pattern and it's predictable and they know what's going to happen and they feel, especially when the kids feel safe and well taken care of, you're not going to find that. A lot of that has to do with we are short on staff. My staff in my own operation have to go into juvenile hall twice every week just to shore up the staffing. So you have people who haven't worked in a juvenile hall for, many, many years, and they are put in there, and they move, and those staff are moved around the facility just to make sure that we have the required staffing ratio, the state required staffing ratios. So, there's not much I can disagree with, and most of it I will agree with. But there's again, running any type of facility is, I'm not going to. It's just, and as long as I've been around this, my mom went to work at Sylmar Juvenile Hall in 1968. It hasn't changed a lot since. It's high liability, extremely difficult, oftentimes highly volatile situation, and not having consistent staff, well-trained staff that have experienced working in these units at least for many years. It makes it a very tough environment. So a lot of what Erin is saying, I acknowledge and explain the best I can that way, having not run it, but being a witness and observing it. I think I see it in much the same way. It's tough, no doubt.
Thank you so much, Paul. Next question for Erin. Can you give examples of some successful community-based alternatives?
There's a huge range of them, obviously. Some of them are just clinical requirements or for treatment that we sometimes think of as community-based alternatives. I think there are certain aspects of those models. First, I think the point that Mr. Vance makes about consistency is critical. I also think that the mission of any program or any staff is critical, and how they understand their mission and how they understand their relationship and what the expectations are of how that relationship will be built and maintained with young people. Because I think by and large, what young people mean when they say they feel safer on certain shifts is they feel more connected and like they have a deeper relationship with those staff, and therefore that those staff are looking out for them. And that probably just contributes to their safety feeling, but it also probably contributes to a lesser degree of assaultive instances at those times, because those staff are more able to manage things going on. And I think that's true for community-based alternatives as well. So I say that because I think the range has a lot to do with how people enter that thinking. The Anti-Recidivism Coalition provides services in the facility right now and in other places across the state. They also provide credible messengers, which is a term that is working its way through understanding right now, but in large part has to do with people who have a lived experience and who have a relationship to the community being able to come in and credibly work with young people in those places, in their own communities. They're able to come into the facilities, work with probation, and work with young people to, I think, have a lot of success. That's one option. David Muhammad runs programs and has given a lot of thought to programs that work outside of carceral facilities as well. I would take a look at his programming. The Young Women's Freedom Center and their Beloved Housing, which is being developed, is working with Mr. Vai's outfit and developing some of the processes for young women and girls. And those are both the ability to go into facilities and work with young people to help support them as they come out or to get them out, and also to develop those resources in the community with the community. There's a group in the child welfare space called the Mockingbird Community Home Model. They develop hub homes. So they are technically foster homes. They could be professional parent foster homes. They could be relative foster homes. They could be more typical foster homes, but they put in a level of training and support that is critical that we don't often think about putting in. We don't often think about using foster homes for this situation, but sometimes young people are in there because where they otherwise have to go is not really going to be successful for them for any number of reasons, including their family dynamics. And the hub model would develop sort of communities of housing rather than just a single foster home, right? So there's a foster home, there's an availability of respite, there's people who come in and work with the family. You're essentially developing the types of structures that go with a family. Ordinarily, I'd often say, I have respite care for my own kids. I call them their grandparents. You know, they go to my sisters, that isn't available to everybody, and it's desperately needed. And it's certainly needed for kids who have a lot of complex care requirements and a lot of service requirements and a lot of other things. Parents need support. So it's developing those models of support around them. I think that really falls into Mr. Vinitz's shop, because those are about leveraging the resources of behavioral health, of CalAIM, of child welfare, of all sorts of other things that are available to develop those programs. And then there's models that could be available but aren't yet, because we just haven't figured out a way to work with the community to do that. I don't think that's a lack of will or any belief that we shouldn't. I just don't think we have figured out how to do that and done it meaningfully as of late. You know, I won't speak to decades past. I think that was different. But where we are right now, I think there's a lot of people inside probation and outside that want to get this right. Are we going to get it right inside of probation? I don't know. I'm hopeful that Mr. Vai's new office will be a big part of helping us create those bridges and work with those community partners, and to engage communities to figure out what they can offer and what they need in order to offer more for their own kids. But there are models out there. I'd be happy to talk more about them at some point, but probably not right now, because it's
well, we have a question that's sort of the reverse of that, and that is, can you be more specific about community-based organizations that are not allowed to innovate?
One of the difficulties in working with public services and government funding is reliability focus. And that can mean sometimes we won't let people try things that might work. I think as the public, we sometimes are the reason for that lack of ability to innovate and try things, because by and large, public officials and community orgs working with public money feel like they can't get it wrong. And I understand that, because when they do, sometimes it's wrong in a big way and it splashes all over the newspaper, and we accuse people of being deliberate in those things. And it's not always the case, but it harms innovation. And sometimes we need that innovation, and we need to be able to try something with all the best intentions and get it a little bit wrong, so long as we're willing to notice that it's going wrong and adapt really quickly, which is also hard for the public sector, but it has to happen. It's why I think a lot of the orgs are working with private money to try to figure out what works and then go for public money, and that's an option for doing it. Sometimes they aren't allowed to do it and aren't given that license because they actually just aren't given the opportunity. I'm going to use Alameda as an example instead of Los Angeles right now. I just learned that a whole bunch of providers asked to be able to put in an application for that capacity building funding that I said was coming out from the state for CalAIM to build the resources in the community that we would need to be able to leverage that funding. So you need a support letter from the county to do that. And they were denied. And I almost wanted to stop the entire public meeting and say, can we just focus on that for a minute? Because if you have people coming to the table asking to do the work, what's the reason for saying we aren't? I mean, these are providers who have worked with the county for a long time in Alameda and are established, well-known, well-respected providers. And we're getting no's. And I thought, well, that's a big red flag for me and how we're operating with providers and with the community, because we need those resources desperately. And sometimes it's about that. It's the coordination and not getting the opportunity. Sometimes it's about us as the public not giving people room to innovate when they really do have best intentions. And sometimes it's about us coming to the room together and talking past each other. And I think a lot of people might hear what I say and what Mr. Vinnet says as talking past each other almost, but I don't think that. I think we largely agree that we want young people to be safe and healthy and taken care of, and we'll have differences of opinion, and we got to come together and work those out and then find ways through it, right? But I think when we don't do that, community providers sometimes lose out in their ability to do what they otherwise could do. So I always enjoy those conversations and respect that people come from that perspective.
So I have a question that's based on, Aaron, what you had mentioned about voter registration, but it's also directed toward Paul as well. Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has a voter registration program for people in jail and will not allow nonprofit organizations like the League into the jails. Would we contact you, Paul, to establish such a program in youth facilities?
You know what? I would need to know if we already have one. I know in our foster care environment in MySpace, we want all youth that are eligible to vote to be registered to vote. We do early registration and do all of that. But on the side, absolutely, Carolyn, I'd be happy to read. If you reach out to me or any of your members reach out to me and see what we can do to get as many people registered and voting as possible. Certainly.
Okay, thank you so very much. Because
I'd love that. I love that for somebody who's been voting in every election since forever. Be happy to do that.
That's great. And I'm going to move now over to Refugio because he's had several questions, and then we can open it up if we need to. The question is, what diversion programs does LA Department of Youth Development have work with? And this person mediates with CYS LA. So what diversion programs do you guys work with?
Yeah, so CYS is one of the organizations that we fund. We are in the spirit of not wanting to be a one-size-fits-all model, right? We contract with different providers in different communities. So the way that we have done our contracting, we put out solicitations and ask folks to respond and say they can serve, say it's Pomona, say it's Long Beach, say it's Antelope Valley, right? And present their model, their way of doing diversion. And so we have we have a framework. It's not a complete sort of like open-ended or open process, but we just ask folks to ensure that they're able to provide young people with connections with sort of 10 different buckets of area, young people and families. So restorative, justice practices or accountability practices, educational supports, mental health, substance use or substance abuse supports, workforce development, mentorship, things as simple as recreational activities, right? Arts, sports, all tailored to a young person's needs, to their specific situation, their specific circumstances, and even length of programming is really tailored to the young person and whatever it is that they're alleged to have done. So I'll have to say that's our model. And then in the county, we have currently, I believe, 13 different nonprofit partners all around the county who are doing this work, with Centinela Youth Services being one of those.
Thank you. And another question, can you describe for a little bit about what your budget is like and what your staffing is like? And following up with that, is it enough?
Yeah, I can answer the second one first. It's definitely, the staffing isn't quite where we need it to be. Our budget has been growing as a department. When we were still just this little unit in the Department of Health Services that was called YDD, I think our budget had grown to around just over 20 million, between 20 and 25 million dollars. When we became the Department of Youth Development last year, that budget grew to closer to around 50. And I think supplemental budget's going before the board, I think this week. So that's likely to grow a bit more. Our staff has grown from July of last year to today from about 18 to, I think we're around 40. And that includes all our program staff, sort of, the more research and policy focused staff and our admin. So definitely, yeah, there's definitely a need, I think, for more staff to make sure that we can just move as quickly as this work needs to move. But we have been getting a lot of support from both the CEO's office and the board to try and get us there. And we're also just working really hard, right? We're a brand new department, so we're figuring out some of these steps and making sure we're putting the right processes to try and expedite getting money out the door, to get contracts in place, to get the services going. So that's been a big focus of our first year, just sort of growing, identifying resources, both in terms of staff and funding, and also working to turn that into, real work happening on the ground and youth getting connected to resources.
And the staff, are they coming from other agencies? Are they independent people? Are they part-time? How have you structured it to try to provide the best services possible?
Yeah, so I should say, currently, the bulk of the department staff now, maybe not just the bulk, it's a mix, right? So we had folks that have come in from outside the county. We have folks that have come in from other departments. We had some folks come over from probation, folks come over from health services. There may be a couple other departments that, when the recruitments were put out, they were the folks that met the need at the moment and came in. But most of the work that the department currently does is sort of at administrative level, right? A lot of our work that's actually being carried out with young people is being done through contractors, through, service organizations out in the community. I heard Anti-Recidivism Coalition name, right? Young Women's Freedom Center. They're both partners on Cardinal Messenger effort, along with Healing Dialogues in Action. So that's how most of the work is being envisioned, that it's community-based, community-centered, and again, meeting the needs of specific communities. So that's largely the model that we're following. It doesn't mean that forever all of the work with the Department of Youth Development will be carried out by contractors on the ground. There might be moments or specific types of work that require more of an in-house approach, and I think at that point, obviously some of the staffing would shift to be more of direct practitioners.
And we know that you're new, but do you have any data on how many youth have been diverted versus youth who were required to enter the juvenile justice or criminal justice system?
Yeah, we definitely have data on how many youth have been diverted, and for anyone interested, that can always be found on our website. You can go there. I don't have it right in front of me, but roughly, to say, since 2019, we've diverted about just over 2,500 youth. Again, we're growing partnerships, and so the rate of referrals has been growing over time. I think right now we're at about 100, roughly, or so young people being diverted per month to our whole network of service providers. And then there's a bit of a challenge, right, just to be transparent in terms of arrest data and knowing like how many young people are going into the system. At least for our department, we don't have access to all of probation's data. We don't have access to all of the law enforcement agencies' data on the ground. So sometimes being able to make that comparison is delayed. We're not able to do it until data is publicly released through the California Department of Justice, and then we can do some comparisons in terms of what's come to us versus what hasn't. Many of our law enforcement partners do give us real-time data, just not all of them. And since we're not in partnership with all of the law enforcement agencies in the county yet, there's still little pockets where we don't have good insight in terms of what's happening. But that's something that we're constantly trying to improve on, in terms of getting that arrest data or having as much of a real-time window into what's happening, and looking for opportunities for more young people to be diverted.
Thank you. And the next question, could you go into a little bit more detail about what kinds of community service the department promotes?
What kinds of community service? I think maybe a little clarity would help. I'm wondering.
Let's see. The participant, would you like to add a little bit more so that you can get a better answer? But I think part of it is like, what kinds of diversion programs? Are there community programs that exist in some places but not others that you would advocate to be increased? I think that would help our viewers.
Yeah, so like I said, our youth diversion model is pretty open, right? Like we have some basic structure and framework around it. We want to make sure that there's some basic things that are happening for our young people, but generally it's a youth development focused model. So it's not about it's not all about like making something right, restitution or that kind of a focus. That all is a part of it. Accountability is an important part of it, but we really are focused on it being a youth development model so that we're identifying what's happening in the young people's lives, what they want to do, what goals they want to accomplish, and how do we support them in getting there. And again, right, that's going to mean a really broad range of things. So I think the area where we are focused on trying to strengthen is just what that network of resources can really be. Our providers they range in size, they range in expertise or experience in what they do. Some are really like strong mental health providers. Some have had a much more like restorative justice focused lens. Some have a much stronger youth development focused lens, right? And so sometimes they can bring other things to the table just because they have additional funding or other contracts and it's readily available within the organization. And then oftentimes they're relying on community resources. So one of the things we're focusing on is how do we make sure that there's a truly robust network of resources in the community that's going to be available to these young people, whether it's county resources, whether it's other community resources are available. And so that's part of what's behind the idea of the youth development networks, that those are really going to be there to be able to wrap around all young people, right? Those that are in diversion and need supports outside of the service provider that they're connected to through that, but also just young people that might have a behavioral issue at school, or they're just looking for something to do, right? They're just looking for something to get engaged in. They don't really have any behavior issues at school happening or disciplinary concerns anywhere or law enforcement contacts. How do we also provide those supports so that they don't end up making a decision that leads them to that?
And a bit of an explanation, a little bit more detail about this last question.
Mhm.
It seems there have been more diversion options since Gascon has been DA. Is that true?
Yeah, our numbers have definitely increased. We were able to build a diversion partnership with the DA's office almost immediately after George Gascon took office. And so we have been getting significant numbers on a month-to-month basis from the DA. And I'll say that's part of what's helped increase that access to diversion for young people in the county while we are ramping up our on-the-ground relationships with law enforcement. So it's definitely increased how many young people have been diverted over the last, 3 years now, close to 3 years now. But our goal in the end really is to have strong partnerships on the ground with law enforcement agencies so that we are diverting as early as possible. We want to, we just want to get youth out of the system as early as possible. Every step along the way creates further potential negative outcomes, further potential like legal considerations for them in the future. So that's always been our goal. And I think we're getting closer to achieving that countywide coverage. And then it will be about increasing buy-in, making sure that each law enforcement agency is diverting to the greatest level that they can legally divert, right? And increasing comfort with it, and trust with it, trust with our providers. So that's definitely our goal, to just keep growing it. But yeah, DA Gascon and his administration has definitely helped increase our diversion efforts as a county.
Thank you. The next question. The Department of Youth Development seeks to provide credible messengers in facilities to provide programming for much of the day, rather than an hour or two in and then out. Can you give us an idea of what that might actually look like when a credible messenger arrives on site to connect with youth?
Yeah, I can I'll give sort of my understanding of it from a bit of an outside perspective, since I'm not in the weeds in that work in the department. But really the idea is that credible messengers are there. They're there to support young people as they're waking up. I don't know all of the processes, right? But that they're able to support young people maybe in probation, really, right? Also in like whether it's movement from one place to another, getting them to school, supporting with activities during some of the downtimes, being there and being present, just building relationships, being able to mentor young people. And again, the idea of them being there all the time is that like they're available, they're there, they're visible, that young people can rely on them being there, can build those kinds of relationships. And so that hopefully also in moments of tension or moments of something happening, maybe something brewing, that they're able to, that those relationships can be supportive in lowering those tensions and avoiding, negative interactions for all involved. So the idea is that they're there all the time. So it's not just they're popping in and out, that they're really there. They're a part of the site. They're a part of the expectation of what young people will see. And again, to support everyone, right? They're not there to replace probation. They're not there to take on functions of probation. They're there to be an added resource and an added support for the young people.
Thank you. And one of the recommendations is the suggestion that community service during mediation be continued. How do you recommend that community services continue to be available during mediation?
I think it always is. Like our program doesn't take away from that. It's just, I think maybe the focus really is on restorative practices that allow for there, whenever possible, for there to be a real conversation, and whoever was harmed can come to an agreement with the young person on what's going to make it right. It's maybe community service, maybe some form of restitution, like, whatever it might be, for that agreement to come from an engagement between those people involved, right, in terms of what's going to make it right. So, if community service is one of those things, and that's an agreement that's come to between a young person and whoever they may have harmed, there's nothing in our process or in our program that would say that shouldn't happen.
Thank you. And this next question is really for everybody. Do any of you have any ideas about models of oversight that really are working well?
Nothing that's working super well. It's an area in our country that we have resisted oversight in for several generations. So pointing to a successful example is hard right now. I will say there's been a real resistance to even the new ombudsperson at the Office of Youth and Community Restoration. There was a push to make sure they had to give 48 hours notice to come meet with a young person or to enter a facility. There's a bill on the governor's desk right now that would take that 48 hours away, and it's being heavily resisted by counties and probation departments and associations, lobby associations. The models of oversight that tend to provide the most critical view, and I don't mean critical as in negative and accusatory, I mean critical as in careful, real, like digging into what's actually happening, tend to be models that include citizen oversight, because they are untied from the public sector. And the public sector has both an incentive and to a certain extent a responsibility to protect itself from ending up in a lawsuit, and that gets in the way. So that citizen level oversight is really important. LA has, interestingly, one of the more effective models. It just doesn't have any teeth on the other side, but the OIG does a lot of investigation in LA and publishes a ton of reports about what goes on in these facilities, but they don't have the power to change anything. And that's where oversight usually unties from things. There's a limit to what they can do. That's the same with the Board of State and Community Corrections. I think they're an example of exactly why citizen oversight is critical. They are incredibly tied to law enforcement. Even the Office of the Legislative Analyst said that a couple of years ago in its report, and questioned whether they could be objective even in creating minimum standards, which if you were watching the minimum standards be created right now, you would understand why. But that is, I think, kind of where we're headed is more of that. And I also just, one other thing that was said, there was a question of the community support models coming in. And I think one of the things that I didn't say that I want to make sure I say is all of the adolescent development research tells us that what young people need most at this age is meaningful, positive adult connection. which largely comes from parents for most kids, right? And doesn't in this instance for these young people. And they've already experienced trauma in their lives. And there's a lot of young people working with disabilities and needing that support. So the credible messengers are not just a service model. They are meant to be positive, deeply connected adult relationships for young people. You know, when I'm operating with my children every day, I am not providing a program. I am just being there. I'm listening to their day. I'm talking to them about their concerns. That's what we need credible messengers to do, because those are missing functions. And when we program, we need something that's also more akin to what people would regularly have. And people often say, well, you know, there's trauma. How are we ever going to undo this? And I said, well, there's a really positive piece of the studies that say that enrichment and positive, meaningful connection to adults during adolescence is one of the things that they have found to ameliorate the effects of early childhood trauma. So adolescence is a second critical period for a young person in their development, when your brain is plastic and all sorts of changes happen again. And what we do and the connections and the relationships that we provide during that time period can ameliorate the effects of that early childhood trauma that works such harm. And it also is a direct correlation to the experience that we will have with these same young people when they return to the community. You know, how they are treated and how the relationships that they have will define their treatment of others and the relationships that people have with them down the road. So those credible messengers, I think, provide that level of service and not just your typical community organization involvement. Just wanted to press that idea.
Thank you very much. And are there any other comments to answer that, or other comments both from the other panelists?
I don't know that I have an answer to that. I think that's something that we're also working to figure out as a Department of Youth Development. We want to make sure that there's good oversight over the work that we're doing as a department. So there's a lot of thought being put into that, and so looking at the different oversight bodies in the county that could potentially oversee our work. But I just wanted to say it's something that I know our leadership in the department is committed to building out. We see that as a critical piece of all of this.
Thank you so much. Thank all of the speakers for giving your time on a Saturday. We do so appreciate it. And you've engendered some very interesting conversation. I'm sure we'll have lots of other discussion from this. I'd like to turn it now back over to Nancy Marr, our co-president for the County League of Women Voters.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you to all of our speakers for a most informative program. I know that very few of us know as much as we should about the juvenile justice system, and we are so happy to have had this program to help us understand better. And thanks you to the audience members for participating. We look forward to seeing all of you again at Winter League Day on January 27th, 2024, sorry. And at that time, we're going to be talking about the March primary and election issues. So with that, I'll say thank you and goodbye today. Have a good weekend.